Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of the Field and Garden Podcast. It is your friend Lisa Mason Ziegler, and I really appreciate you dropping in, and you will be rewarded today because today is going to be a talk that could change your farming and gardening life from here on out. Rhonda and I have all often started our talks off that way because, friends, we get the messages from you guys that say, you never knew until you heard this. So today is really going to open your eyes to some things. So I am joined here by crew member Rhonda Graves. Hi, Rhonda.
Hey, Lisa.
So Rhonda and I have been friends forever, and she volunteered on the farm years ago, and she's a part of our team and has been for several years. I know many of you may have spoken with her when you call to place orders. She is our warehouse manager, and I appreciate that she loves bugs as much as I do. And it's nothing for her to come and get me out of my office and say, come out here and look at this. We have some of the coolest moths, frogs, all kinds of cool stuff up where our warehouse is. And so I'm glad that Rhonda's joining me here today. And we have a special guest today, and it is Jessica Wallacer, who we've kind of known about each other for a long time, but we've become fast friends through the most recent years. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Lisa.
So the backstory on Jessica is I first learned about her from one of her earlier books called Good Bug, Bad Bug. And if you have been hanging out with me very long, or you're one of my students, you know that it's on my must-have books. Because friends, it is like the baby step into learning why you need to know more about the good bugs that are out in your garden. And that is just a really simple guide, especially, who wants like a 500-page book? Not most of us. We know we have lots of flower farmers listening here, and there you go. Rhonda's even holding it up. So you've got to get started in this. And if you're feeling like you're a little overwhelmed, that is a perfect get started book. But the newest and latest book, or actually it's an updated version of one of Jessica's previous books, that she has just come out, and the title of it is Attracting Beneficial Bugs to Your Garden, a Natural Approach to Pest Control. And friends, it doesn't matter if you're a home gardener with a small spot out in the backyard, or if you are a commercial cut flower grower, this is a book you have got to have. And I will tell you that I ordered the book soon after it came out. And Rhonda and I were going to mention it in one of our talks. So I, grabbed the book to kind of like just open it up and find a topic that I could like talk about. Y'all, like 2 hours later, I come out of the book. It's really that, it's just information we can use. So Jessica, I just want to first tell us a little bit how you came to be a bug hugger, as what Ron and I call ourselves, bug huggers.
I love that. I think I'm going to get t-shirts made, like official bug hugger, right? We can all wear them. So I wasn't a bug hugger initially, let's just say that. I have a degree in horticulture. And so my extent of, education and entomology was essentially like, what do you nuke the bugs with to keep them off of your poinsettias and cyclamen in your greenhouse? That was the experience that I had coming out of college with a degree in horticulture. And, it wasn't really until a few years later when I hired a woman to work for me. I had a garden maintenance company here in Pittsburgh, and she was a small scale farmer and was incredibly interested in organic agriculture. And, we spent 8 to 10 hours a day, every day together out in gardens, and we would just chit chat, as we were working. And she really educated me quite a bit on different ways that you can manage pests in the garden that don't involve, all the pesticides that I had essentially been taught to use. And I was a certified pesticide applicator. And she opened my eyes. She brought me a lot of information about the dangers of different pesticides. And I learned a lot from her. And I am an absorber of information and a giant science nerd. So I love to read research. She got me some papers. She got me some websites. I started to do research from there. And it was just, my brain exploded. I was like, oh my gosh, there is so much amazing stuff happening outside every day. And here I am, and all I'm doing is paying attention to the plants, when really I should also be paying attention to all of the things that the plants support. And it just really, truly snowballed from there. And here we are, you know, what, 20 years later, 25 years later, and bugs are my jam. Like I love them. I love they're dynamic, and yeah, I'm a bug hugger. For sure.
Yeah, I think bug hugging is, we should coin that term, Rhonda.
Definitely. We could sell shirts.
Yeah, you know. So first I want to say, don't you just spending time out in a garden with different types of folks is just the best time to learn stories, to learn about new things about stuff, right? So tell us a little bit about attracting beneficial bugs to your garden. I know why every person that has any outdoor space under their belt that they care for or have should definitely, you know, be interested in this topic. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so I think that we as a human race have sort of lost touch with the checks and balance systems that nature has co-evolved or evolved a lot since, you know, millennia, right? Like long before we humans arrived on the scene, there has always been this system of checks and balances. And I think we've forgotten about it, especially in the world of agriculture. And so I feel that it's really important for gardeners and farmers to understand this natural cycle of predator and prey that exists like in any ecosystem around the world, which is obviously that there's prey animals and then there's predatory animals. The predators feed or use the prey as, you know, hosts for their young, or they feed on them. And so it creates this balance, right? Nothing gets out of whack because the predators are there to manage the prey. So attracting beneficial bugs to your garden is all about ways that you can encourage these predatory and parasitoidal insects that are essentially the predators in your garden, and how you can use them to help manage the pests in your landscape. So by encouraging them and creating a space where they're safe, where they can flourish, where they have a diversity of food sources available for them, where they've got habitat available for them, you create that space. You know, if you build it, they will come and they will stay and they will thrive and they will eat all your bad bugs, right? All the things that are harming your plants. And it brings that balance back to the landscape that use of pesticides can disrupt. Certainly we're seeing, you know, issues, climate change disrupting it. We're seeing just human activities in terms of monoculture, you know, planting a monoculture that can disrupt that natural cycle of predator and prey and that balance. So it's about re-achieving and re-establishing that very healthy balance in the garden.
You know, it almost seems like it's so easy for people to jump into gardening and like feel like they just need to get the right products and they can make it all work, right? It's like there, and I don't want to say that gardening is an art, but there is a skill to gardening when you do it with nature and encourage all of, you know, the checks and balance systems, right? To actually, I mean, it just makes such perfect sense. And I know that Rhonda is the same as me. We have more than once been caught in the garden watching this system like work right in front of us. I mean, is that like the most captivating time? I mean, Rhonda, don't you remember we have had assassin bugs like taking down stink bug, and you can hardly stop watching them, right?
And those are the ones that are, you know, really big and showy and, you know, show you what they're doing. But I know in your book, you talk a lot about the ones that you don't really see that are out there doing important work. And it's hard. Some of them are just, you know, they're out there, the big wheel bug or whatever, but then there are those little itty bitty wasps that lay their eggs inside of aphids, that I'm sure if I did see it, I probably just saw it was who knows what flying by. But
yeah, it's to me, it's because we don't, you know, it is an art, number one. And number two, you know, we're busy. We're like so focused on cultivating our plants that sometimes we forget to stop and pay attention So all of the small things that are carrying on around us and doing their very good work. You know, and you mentioned the little tiny parasitic wasps. That group of parasitic wasps are called Afidius wasps. And, you know, you say the word wasp and people right away get scared and they think, why would I want to, you know, have wasps in my garden? Well, these are a whole group of wasps that are non-stinging, parasitoidal. Like they have evolved that they can't sting you, and their job is to parasitize other insects. And that's how they get rid of these. And there's some of the species are just a gnat. They're literally gnat-sized, and they lay a single egg in the back of a single aphid. So that's how tiny they are, because most gardeners know how big an aphid is. So they're way smaller than an aphid even. And it's something that you wouldn't really see unless you know to look for it, number one. And number two, that you take, you know, 10 minutes when you see you have aphids on your milkweed to sit there and watch. Because if you have aphids on your milkweed and you have 10 minutes of time and you sit there quietly and still, I can guarantee you that you will see Afidius wasps show up, and you can watch them lay eggs in the back of those aphids. And I have video of it that I've captured on my cell phone. You know, people laugh at me, but I always say aphids are a gift to gardeners, because they truly are. They are like the ultimate prey insect. They reproduce quickly, they mature fast, they lay a lot, you know, they have a lot of babies. And so they are also a food source for dozens, if not hundreds of different species of beneficial insects. So when we have a lot of aphids in our garden, that means that we have food for a lot of great beneficial insects, and we can see them in action if we give them some time to show up and work their magic. And so they're a gift to us, because with them, it allows our gardens to have a very good population of these really good bugs that will then go on to manage lots of other pests as well. So don't panic when you see aphids. Instead, spend the 10 minutes out there with them and watch and see who shows up. And it's really amazing what you'll find.
Maybe think of them as appetizers for the good, appetizers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I mean, for sure. It's like, I'm thinking more like the meat and potatoes, you know, and I tell you the common questions, because, you know, we just get our inboxes full of lots of questions every day here at the Gardener's Workshop. And now that it's heating up, there's more insects, you know, that are coming out. And I feel like people panic when they discover and come upon insects in their garden. And I mean, we have preached it from the rooftops that you do nothing until you get an identification on what it actually is. People just assume it's a pest that's going to damage your plant. But I, in fact, find that what are the numbers? You might be the person that could actually correct me after all these years. So in the big world of insects, what percentage are actually pests and what are beneficial? Because, I mean, isn't it not true, Jessica, that all the pests, as you just described, are necessary to benefit somebody in the food chain?
Yeah. This is something that surprises a lot of people, because they automatically equate bugs in the garden to bad, unless they're a bee or a butterfly, because they can recognize those, right?
Right.
So science has managed to identify about 1.5 million insect species on the entire planet. Right. So, but they suspect that there's between 2 million and 20 million different insect species. So if it falls on the lower scale, we've managed to identify a little more than half. If it's closer to 20 million, why we don't even have the tip of the iceberg actually scientifically identified. Like, these insects are going extinct before we can even identify and catalog them in the scientific literature. And that's really sad that is happening. But of that 1.5 million or so species that have been identified, there's less than 1% of them are actually categorized as human or agricultural pests. So it's an incredibly small percentage of them. Now, obviously we focus a lot of money, we focus a lot of time, we focus a lot of our attention as gardeners on those bad bugs, that less than 1%, because, the marketing gods have made it so that we feel that we need to do all of this. But my hope with attracting beneficial bugs to your garden and everything I discuss in it is that we can switch from focusing on the bad guys and getting rid of them to focusing on the good guys and encouraging them so that we can, again, get that balance back into the garden. It's a tough shift, but I do think it's happening. I think that there are a lot of gardeners that now recognize the need to have insects in our garden, not only to feed the other insects, but also many of them are pollinators. All of them feed birds or somebody else higher up in the food chain. And all of that is critical because it's all a link in our own human food chain. And, literally, if there were not bugs, we would be up to our necks in dead stuff and poop. And eventually we would be dead because bugs take care of the dead stuff and poop, and they keep us alive through the pollinating of the crops and the major role that they play in the ecosystem. So we couldn't live without them.
So true. So very, very true. And I want to kind of just for us to hit on what are the different things that people are going to find in this book. But I want to just say that we have become in the flower world kind of the poster child that, I mean, we don't even use any organic pesticides here on our farm. We haven't for over 10 years. We don't find it necessary because when you step away from the trigger, meaning the spray bottle, and just give nature time to catch up, or maybe even eliminate that buggy pest plant from your lineup of offerings, right? That's a big part of our strategy. That you just have to not panic. And that's why I really wanted you to flush out what percentage of insects are really damaging. And I did say 1% for all these years, but I wasn't sure it was truly factual. I've looked around, you know what I mean? And you can't really find it. So I appreciate you affirming that.
Sure.
So
it's interesting though, Lisa, if I can just touch real quick a little further to that. And it's our own fault in many ways, because that 1% of damaging pests, a big reason why so many of those in that category are actually pests to begin with is because they have been moved to a climate where they're not native, where they are an introduced exotic pest, and there is no predator and prey cycle established there for them. They're not recognized as a food source by the birds in that region, by the other insects in that region. And that's how their populations can explode. There are no, predators that have co-evolved with them to take care of them. So like, for example, you might look like at something, for trees like the emerald ash borer, right? And the reason they run rampant here through the northeastern United States is because all of the little parasitic wasps that co-evolved with them where they are native on another continent didn't come here with them. So they got here and there's no natural system of checks and balances in place. And that's why their population can explode. Same thing, brown marmorated stink bugs, right? They arrived here on the East Coast from Asia. They did not come along with the predators that co-evolved with them. So that's why their population was allowed to and able to explode. Japanese beetles in the 60s, same thing. So the reason so many of them are problematic is because we've taken them out of their native growing zone where they have the checks and balances and moved them to a place where they don't. And we grow monocultures. We grow big, long, straight rows of things. And that is literally a landing strip for these pests. When you grow in a mixed habitat instead, and you partner whole bunches of plants together into communities, that makes it harder for the pests to find their host plants. And it makes it harder for them to move from plant to plant because things are mixed all together. So it's sort of a problem that we've caused ourselves in many ways. But I think there's ways out of it, right? It's never too late to change.
Well, and I think your book is a roadmap for that. So, I'm just looking at the contents. And so the first one that catches my eye is who they are, how they work, and what they eat. I mean, it just helps you to really align your garden, right, as you walk them through this book. Why don't you just kind of take us through kind of the introductory? And I want to say, flower farmers that are listening, this is so easy to implement on your farm because, first off, a couple of the top cutting guard flowers that we grow are native beneficial insect attractors. So this is a super easy way that Jessica has really laid out of just how to get started or how to go full board, y'all. Go ahead, Jess.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, the first thing is learning to identify the insects, because you have to know what you're looking for. And once you know what you're looking for and you can see them out in your garden, it's like a little light bulb goes off in your head. Oh my gosh, everything I'm doing is working. Or look, there are already some of them here. Now, how do I go about encouraging more of them? So, I have a whole bunch of beneficial bug profiles in the book where you learn about the predators, you learn about the parasitoids. So, people think, boom, ladybugs. All right, what pops into your head? A red bug with black polka dots. But actually, of the 400 or so species of ladybugs in North America, very few of them are red with black polka dots. They come in all different colors and patterns, and some of them are striped, some of them have blue eyes, some of them are black and gray and brown and teeny tiny, and some of them are bigger. And so learning to identify what they look like so that you know that they're working is really a key. And then it's about planting the right plants to support them. And you mentioned that a lot of the crops that you're already growing as cut flowers, Lisa, are in this book. And I will tell you right now that there are two big category plant families that I know that you grow a lot of on your farm. And I see all the time in cut flowers arrangements. And those two plant families that are particularly good at supporting beneficials are the carrot family, which is anything with that sort of umbel-shaped flower, that characteristic umbrella-shaped inflorescence, which is a cluster of thousands of tiny little flowers. So if somebody might think of a Queen Anne's lace flower or Ammi, or anything in that, or fennel or dill, right? So that's one plant family that's extremely good at supporting these bugs. And the other one would be the aster family, Asteraceae, which is anything that has that sort of classic daisy-like floral structure, which would be your sunflowers and your cosmos and coreopsis and heliopsis and helianthus. And, that you have that cluster of central, what are called disc flowers in the middle, if you picture a sunflower in your head, and they're surrounded by what are called the ray flowers, which we call petals, right? So anything that has that structure is also an inflorescence that is hundreds or thousands of tiny flowers clustered together, surrounded by those petals around the outside. All those tiny flowers in both of those plant families need to be pollinated by tiny insects. The insect does not need a specialized mouth part like they would need if it was a deep tubular flower, like say a foxglove or a Nicotiana, right? Where it's a tubular flower and they need a long tongue to get in there. That's not true with the carrot family and the aster family. They're shallow exposed nectaries, and they are perfect for all of these little tiny wonderful bugs.
I've often said that little teeny bugs have little teeny mouths and they need little teeny flowers. And that's exactly what those are.
Yeah. And they have little teeny wings. So
yeah, I mean, it's just so awesome. And I will totally affirm what you're saying. We often, we grow Daucus, false Queen Anne's lace. And then after we're done cutting it, I try my best to leave it in the garden as long as possible, because a lot of little short shoots will come up, which aren't good for us for cutting, but they still bloom. And you want to talk about a study in sitting and watching, Jessica? Oh my gosh, sit on a cinder block and just watch the canopy. You'll affirm that. So, all right, that is really great. So what else do we have in here?
So after we identify sort of the plants, then we really want to talk about sort of how we partner the two of them together. How do we create, an environment in which these bugs will thrive? Because it's not just about planting the right plants, it's also caring for that space appropriately. So there have been these big, PR campaigns or these memes that you'll see that like, leave the leaves, right? Like leave the leaves in the fall, and you're supporting pollinators and all that stuff. And I love that people want to support pollinators, but, pollinators aren't the only bugs on the block, right? There's all of these good bugs that help us manage pests, and they need a home for the winter as well. So that comes not just from leaving the leaves, but also from leaving plants stand. Many of them will shelter in hollow stems. They will shelter in the nodes of plants, where the leaf meets the stem, they'll hunker down right in there. They'll go into spent flowers. Some will go into old seed pods. Some will go under the leaf litter, and that's where a lot of these insects spend the winter months in dipause, which is sort of like the insect version of hibernation. And so when we clean our gardens and clean out our fields at the end of every growing season, when we strip them bare, we're removing those insects that maybe already be hunkered down for the winter, or we're removing the sites where they can do that. So, for me in my garden, and this was hard the first few years as a horticulturist, like it was hard because I had been taught and had taught others for many years to put the garden to bed clean. Treat it like your living room, vacuum it all up, cut it all down, and put it to bed clean. And that is not the way to do things. And we know now through a lot of research that leaving things stand provides the right overwintering sites. So I know, and I hear the same argument from people all the time, which is, well, there's always so much work to do in the spring. If I don't do it in the fall, I'm going to be overwhelmed with work in the spring. I can tell you now, after almost 10 years of doing this, that doing your cleanup in the spring is significantly easier than doing it in the fall. Everything is lighter. It's partially decomposed. In many cases, in my gardens, I can just simply run the mower over everything and chop it up into bits, leave all that debris lie in place. It will serve as a mulch. I do that when temperatures hit the 50s regularly in the spring, because that's like, it's not when all insects wake up, because I don't want to make a blanket statement like that, but that's sort of like a safe target to aim for if you have to have to clean out beds or cut them down. When we get a week of temperatures in the 50s, that's usually a safe time to go ahead and do that.
That's a really good reminder. We try so hard. There's areas, I'd like for us to just jump for a minute to the beetle banks that you have a little section on in here. I thought so much of, we have habitat islands here on the farm, which literally kind of grew out of a big Rudbeckia triloba, 200-foot beds that were next to each other. And we know what they do. They reseed. I just kind of let them go. And now, almost 8 or 9 years later, that bed area has never been mowed. It just kind of totally takes care of itself. But other plants have been married in. We now have Joe Pye weed and some other things. It is so easy to take care of. But at first I struggled with like what you're speaking of. It's like, oh my gosh, if we're just going to leave it there, what a mess that's going to be in the spring. Well, guess what? It wasn't a mess at all, because we don't even mow it in the spring. We just let it do its own thing. And I think people underestimate the power of stepping away under the right circumstances sometimes, right? And, I want to say to the people that are thinking, oh my gosh, well, I live in the city, that's not really an option. Well, friends, I am dead in the middle of the city. I am 100% surrounded by houses now. And the key to our magic here on our farm of being a farm being known for being tidy, which I just think is such a joke. But you know why my place appears tidy? We keep all the edges tidy. We mow the edges. We weed eat the edges. Those habitat islands get mowed around the edges, but there's a 15 by 100-foot island that never gets touched, right? So it's manageable. And I know, Rhonda, you have a little spot at home too that you do kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah. Just a couple of years ago, actually, I looked at it. It's about 10 by 10. So I cut down a maple tree that was just giving me shade and decided to plant some natives in there. And it's amazing. I can, if you look at my phone, iNaturalist, all the pictures are in this one little spot in my backyard. So, yeah.
Yeah, those habitat islands are a great way to do it. And the beetle bumps, which is a habitat island specifically for ground beetles who eat slugs and snails. That one is particularly planted with native grasses, bunch grasses. and that's great habitat for them. But certainly any of the native plants that you mentioned, Lisa, like your Joe Pye weeds and things, any of those are going to create natural habitat and overwintering sites for these insects, and lots of pollinators as well. And I completely agree 1,000,000% about keeping the edges neat and tidy, because the average Joe person isn't going to know a Joe Pye weed from, a dandelion. And so, but when they see that the edges, the grass is mowed between things and around things and the edges are tidy, then they have this mental like, oh, that's with purpose. That was done with purpose. And so therefore it's okay. If you don't have that and everything is just, grown in and tall all the time and you don't have those edges to it, they automatically think, oh, it's unkempt. Right. But if it's mowed on the edges, then it's done with purpose. So that's a great strategy.
Yeah, well, and it works, and just keeps everybody, as you said, it really lets everybody know this is something here, and it really works. So I'm just reading about your companion planting, battling pests with plant partnerships. What's that chapter about?
Yeah, so that chapter is sort of there's some interesting studies out there about some plants that you can partner together that lead to a reduction in pests. So for example, my alma mater, which is Penn State University, when brown marmorated stink bugs started to become really problematic on our local orchards, apple orchards in particular, but also grapes, they started to look at, if they planted certain plants around those orchards, could they use them as a trap crop for luring away the brown marmorated stink bugs? And there was some interesting results that they found with sunflowers in particular. So they found that when they partnered the sunflowers in between rows of apple trees, they would do, swaths of sunflowers. They found that they had a reduced amount of damage from the brown marmorated stink bugs on the apple trees because they were preferring to go to the sunflower. So they acted as a trap crop. There were other studies that look, in an orchard, instead of using like orchard grass that they would regularly mow in between the plants, they planted with wildflower blends. And did they see a reduction in, apple maggots and plum curculios and other pests in the orchard? And yes, they did. Again, because that kind of habitat of mixed planting is very encouraging to beneficial insects that prey on those pests. So there's certain combinations of plants that you can do that will help bring in beneficials that will help you reduce those pests. Another big one that I talk about in that chapter is the partnership of sweet alyssum and lettuce. And if you go to organic farms in California, you'll see rows of lettuce alternated with rows of sweet alyssum. And that's because the sweet alyssum attracts and supports the tachnid flies and syrphid flies that prey on the aphids that like to feed on the lettuce. So there's partnerships for that. And that chapter actually then became my another new book that I did, which is Plant Partners, which is science-based companion planting for the vegetable garden. So that chapter was so important and valuable to people, and I got such great feedback that I thought, this whole spiel about companion planting, and so much of it is focused on folklore and
Right.
old wives' tales, but I knew there was also information out there that's science-based. So I sought it out and I found all this amazing research on it and put that into a whole other book about it. But of course, there's bugs in that one too.
But it's just the bottom line is you have to take a moment and figure these things out. There is a better solution to pests than picking up a bottle and spraying. I mean, I say that because, oh my gosh, I mean, how many times a day do we get a question of what should I get to take care of that? And it's like, none of that. First, what is it you have? You don't even know what pest, or if you even have a pest.
Right. Yeah. And I get those same questions myself. I mean, I had a radio program here in Pittsburgh for 15 years where we took calls, and 90% of the calls were focused on, quick, what should I spray?
Right.
Hurry up, I need the solution to this. What should I spray? And it always took a moment for me to take a breath and convince them that spray is not the first answer. It's not even the 10th answer. There's 9 other things that you can do first to help you bring that pest problem in check. And that is a really important concept to understand, but it's also one that I know takes time for people to come to see. especially new gardeners, because they have invested a lot of time. We all have invested time and money into making a beautiful garden. And it's natural to go into panic mode when you see something that you perceive to be destroying your hard work. You're not going to let the bully at the beach kick down your sandcastle, right? Like, you want to take that bully down so he leaves all the work intact. So we go into that panic mode in our gardens, thinking that the pest is the bully kicking down our sandcastle, when in fact the bully, what we think is a bully is not a bully. They deserve to, they had the sand before you had the sand, right? Just like the bugs had the garden before you had the garden. So it's a tough concept for people to understand, but it's something that I preach and teach, certainly in all of my books and online courses on my website, like that it's getting that point across, that is so, so valuable.
So tell us about that. Tell us about Savvy Gardening and how people can reach out to you, and tell us about your partnership there and where they can find your books, and I know your courses. Tell us about all that a little bit more.
Sure. So Savvy Gardening, SAVVY gardening.com is my website, and I have it with two partners, Nikki Jabor, who is a year-round vegetable gardener up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and she's written some best-selling and award-winning books on growing veggies year-round. If she can do it in Canada, I know I can do it here in Pennsylvania, and you can do it in Virginia, and everybody else can do it as well. And then our other partner is Tara Nolan, who is a garden writer and editor in Ontario, Canada. And she is a raised bed gardening expert. So on the website, we write about all things gardening. I mean, every question that you ever had about gardening, you can find answers to on Savvy Gardening. And we do have a series of online classes, online courses. I have one on organic pest management. Nikki has one on growing year-round using mini hoop tunnels. Tara has one on raised bed gardening that's coming out soon. So you can find more about me, more about my books, and everything you want to know about gardening, you can find it on savvygardening.com.
So I think it's time for us to wrap this up. I'm just so thrilled that you keep writing about bugs, because it's really simple. It's simple once you read it and say, it's like, oh, that's how that works. You plant the flowers and or the habitat. Doesn't have to always be flowers, right? And they will come. And I want to just ask you one question before we wrap this up. And then Rhonda, if you have anything you want to ask, what is your feeling on purchasing beneficial insects?
So I think if you have high tunnels, if you grow in high tunnels, if you grow in greenhouses, I think they're excellent, because you can purchase targeted specific predators to release for your targeted specific pest, whether you have spider mites in your high tunnel or thrips or whatever the problematic pest is. You can actually work with an insectary to select the right species of beneficial insects to introduce to that enclosed habitat. I think they're very valuable there. I think they're less valuable if we're releasing them, let's say, quote unquote, into the wild, right? Into an open space of our garden or on our farm, where they can leave, right? They have a bigger area in which to spread out. So it's a little bit harder to target them. I do think, however, though, that in some cases it can be good and a worthwhile investment, especially if what you're releasing is in either the egg or the larval stage. So for example, I wouldn't recommend releasing adult lacewings, but if you can release larval lacewings, they don't have wings, they can't travel very far, and you put them where that pest is actively damaging your plants, then they can go out and seek out those pests. But you have to have the resources there for them. You have to have what they need. They don't need just the pests to eat, but they also need the carbohydrates that are available in nectar. So you have to have lots of things in flower for them as well. So it's harder to achieve in the outside environment than it is indoors in a high tunnel or a greenhouse.
Good, because I that's a question that we get often. So thank you so much for.
And the ladybugs, I should clarify this too. The ladybugs that you buy on the counter at the garden center are wild collected. So those are a big, fat, giant no-no. They're a species called the Convergent lady beetle. They are native here to North America, but they are called the convergent lady beetle because they converge en masse, like millions of them on sunny mountaintops to sort of hibernate and take shelter for the winter. And they go out and they suck them up with backpack vacuums and package them up into those little containers and then ship them around the country. So it's impacting the wild population, and it's also potentially spreading disease to your indigenous ladybugs. So that's a practice that's definitely a big no-no in my book.
Yeah, I think for the gardener, it's just simpler to plant a few of the right plants to attract what you need. And I mean, it's just a whole lot easier, right?
It's easier and it's way smarter. It's way smarter to create a garden environment that's pesticides free, that has the right species of plants, and that we don't cut down to the nub every winter. That's the habitat that's going to foster the ones you already have, support them, provide what they need, and encourage them to reproduce and stick around.
So Rhonda, do you have any closing?
I could stay here all afternoon, but I was just going to say, I think it has changed so much in the last 15 years. People are really, I think, are thinking more about how they're planning and what they're planning, and planning with a purpose, whether it's for monarchs or bees, or hopefully now all the other little guys that they, that aren't quite as showy as the monarchs or the honeybee. But yeah, I think it's changed a lot, but thank you so much for helping everyone on their way, because I think it takes a lot of voices to turn the boat. So.
It does. I agree. And I love that so many of these new gardeners that we're seeing come on the scene in the next, the last couple of years, they're really mission driven. They're mission based gardeners. They want to garden with purpose, with mission, and they want to do it without hurting other things. So that's exciting to see. That even though they're newbies and they might be a little bit scared of things, that they do want to educate themselves. And I love that. And I'm thrilled to play a small part in that.
So Jessica, thank you so much for joining us here today. And you too, Rhonda.
Thanks.
And friends, you can find Jessica's book at any bookseller, Attracting Beneficial Bugs to Your Garden. And I highly recommend it. I'm holding my own copy here that it's tagged and marked. And I think it's just an essential for your library. And so, friends, if you are enjoying what we're talking about on this podcast, we would love for you to share it with your friends, to write a review. That really helps us so very much. Every review that gets posted means the podcast apps show our podcast to more browsers. So, and I read every one of them. So I really appreciate you guys doing that. And if you want to learn more about the work that we're doing here at the Gardener's Workshop, you can head over to thegardenersworkshop.com, and our online garden shop is there, our online courses. There are tons of resources. And you can sign up for our weekly farm news that will keep you in tune with things just like what you've listened to today. So friends, thank you for giving a listen here at the Field and Garden Podcast. And thank you, girls, so much for joining us here today. And get a book, friends. Ciao.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. Ciao.